Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wayfare podcast. You are listening to episode 5, and today we are going over podcast schedule. This is going to be a pretty lengthy discussion, I believe, just because there's a lot of questions that I tend to run into. When is the right type of frequency that we should release? What time is appropriate for when we release? And it's a little bit more an intense question that I usually run into when I talk to clients. And I think this is going to be a really good episode for you to kind of like chew on when we're done discussing, when we're done filling out this information. Again, if you're new to the show or you're randomly checking out this episode to kind of get the vibe for who I am and what the show is all about, for this particular series of episodes, we are going over this podcast workbook that I have available for whoever wants it. It's a free resource that I like to share. I find it really helpful for clients that work with me to fill it out, and then we talk through it and work through it together. Honestly, if we do consulting calls and they don't have this provided, this is what I talk with them through and ask them. Ask my questions. This is what it's based around. My consulting is based around. So, if you have the workbook, you got me. That's what consulting is. On the first call, afterwards, it's a little bit more nuanced. And it's currently a free resource. You can check it out through the description and show notes, depending on how you're listening to this, whether it's video or audio. And I'm filling it out with you guys. We're checking it out together. So I'm it's very progressive, the episode by episode. And let's just jump right into it. Again, rate, review, share with people, make a comment, and start a conversation with people. And I want this to be super collaborative. And podcasting is such a broad form of media. It's cool to see what everyone's coming up with and talking about. So right off the rip, we're on page 11. The first question that is on there is, how often will you publish an episode? And this is this is a pretty strong question that I get from clients. I had a conversation as of this recording. Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. It's kind of a blur. But they were asking, do you think weekly is good? Do you think bi-weekly is good? Do you think monthly is good? And I asked them, I asked them what they were feeling because there's a couple of sub questions I think that need to be asked of you before you fully determine what is appropriate. And there is data that shows if you do weekly, your download numbers are going to be stronger per month. And there are some platforms that are out there like Buzzsprout or there's another one that's coming to my mind, but I can't think of of course, in the moment when I'm recording. I forget the name of it. Buzzsprout's the big one that I can think of right off the top of my head, because that's usually what I work on with clients as of this recording, where they request that you have X amount of downloads per month. And so if you have a weekly frequency, those are more downloads that you can get per month, and you kind of game the system a little bit. But I mean, context. They have a program for dynamic ad insertion where if you get X amount of downloads per month, you are allowed to get into that program. I kind of just started talking about that without giving the context. Super sorry about that. If you do weekly, you can get more downloads and you can have more proof to be a part of that program. But it's one thing to game the system on that. And it doesn't have to be that particular program. That's just an example. But there's a way to kind of game the system where you have more proof of downloads based on your frequency. But like, is your personal schedule going to be available to do that? Like, can you do weekly? If you have a full-time job, that would be I would imagine that'd be pretty intense depending on your personality type, based on, can you consistently be a weekly show based on your full-time job? And so then I say, cool, well, if you can't do that, that's totally fine. Let's take a step back. Can you do bi-weekly? Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I can do once every other week for a recording session, and that'll give you time to post-produce it and get it scheduled, write up all the show notes, because there's a lot of work that is involved too. Can you record weekly? If you go back to the weekly discussion, can you record weekly? Can you produce show notes weekly? Can you edit weekly? Can you create clips weekly, if it's a video podcast? And if you can't, bi-weekly is totally cool. Yeah, and you can also outsource help. Like, you can get a post-producer, like, what we do, Wayfare recording. That's our big 9-to-5 job, is post-production. And that will definitely help the workflow. But can you still show up every week? And so bi-weekly might be the option. Can you do 2 times per week? That's super intense. I do have a client that can do that, but he also manages his team to a point where he can be the face of the show 2 times per week. Like, that is now a part of his job description for his business. And I guess I'm trying to like say all this to say that, like, can you show up consistently every time for your show, for your listeners? Because if you're trying to develop a podcast that is building credibility and you're creating a community around your show, and your listenership, followership, whatever, if they can rely on you showing up every week, you're building more credibility and more reliance. And if you're being super sporadic, like, oh yeah, we're going to do a weekly show, but then you skip 1 week per month. If you start skipping 2 weeks per month, it's just, you're going to start losing those downloads. You're going to start losing the followers, the listeners, whatever. And your credibility is starting to diminish, I guess. But that's all like on a personality level too. Like, I like, if your podcast is a personality driven based podcast or whatever, if it's a corporate podcast, a B2B podcast, whatever you want to call it, monthly is totally cool. Bi-monthly is totally cool. The goal is to, the goal at that point is to just kind of build rapport, build a network. It's still good to have some sort of frequency, because there may still be listeners out there that are kind of relying on that. But like, for this show, to kind of answer the question here, if I were to fill this out, I'm filling it out with you guys. I would say other, because I'm going to be working on this. You're going to be seeing this. You're going to see season 1 all together at once, because I'm trying to build more of an information-based podcast for this season, at least. I want to be able to have everyone be able to watch all the videos all at once. There's no cadence. There's no whatever. It's just like, cool, we're releasing it. 10 or 11 episodes, I think. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember when I'm releasing all at once. But boom, all in one day. That would be my answer to this. So the next thing on here is, what days of the week will it be published, or what day of the week will it be published? This is going to be much more dependent on what schedule you end up forming for your podcast. This is going to be also based on what your genre is and what your demographic is. I like to share with people, if it's going to be a true crime or personality-driven based podcast, good recommended days to release your podcast are usually going to be Mondays and Fridays. Those are pretty good. There's really the whole thing about podcasting is there's no wrong answer here. So there's no wrong answer for that. Tuesdays might be more practical. Thursdays might be more practical. But I like the idea personally that you do either Monday or Friday, because if you're a personality-driven show, like to that degree, I guess, whatever. Mondays are super exciting because it's like, cool, it's the first day of the week. I'm having a hard time getting to work, but I got this show that comes out every morning. Like, I have something to look forward to Monday mornings, right? And the same can kind of go for the Fridays too, where it's like, sweet, it's the end of the week. I'm super stoked for Friday. This is going to be really great. And the cherry on top is I get a new podcast episode. It's kind of that headspace. And that's really just an example to kind of run with. Again, there's no wrong answers. I know that some people like doing Wednesday mornings if you're kind of doing much more of like the corporate B2B style podcasting. That's more of a trend that I've noticed. There's not really any data that shows that is a strong one. It's just something I know is pretty good for that angle of podcasting, the marketing style of podcasting. Yeah, and then the last question on this page is, what time will it be published? Again, there's not really a wrong answer, but if you want to kind of run with the example that I shared for the personality-driven podcast, if it's going to be a Monday or a Friday morning, I like the idea of releasing it earlier in the morning, like 4 or 5 a.m., which you can pre-schedule it, like what I like to do with clients that I work with is that when they give me the green light that this is going to be published, I'll say, cool, we'll publish it 5 a.m. on Friday. I'll go in and you can pre-schedule all the stuff. You don't need to get up early and do that. That's ridiculous. But I like to do early morning because when people get up in the morning and they are getting ready, they see on their phone that, oh, new episode's up. So it's ready to go, good to go. Not much thought of it. They get in the car and they start commuting and they turn on the podcast and they're good, like they're on their way. So, yeah, that's pretty much as far as logistics go on how to publish your show. Page 12 is the last page of the section. And really, this is kind of much more of a like zoomed out image or zoomed out way of looking at your schedule for your show. So like, hypothetically, let's say that we're going to do a bi-weekly, every other week podcast scheduling where, we're kind of working backwards. We want the show to be released on a Friday, 5 a.m. And it's every other week. So if Friday is your end goal, if you're working backwards, I'm looking at the calendar right now. There's like a calendar image that I have on this PDF. So you're going to spend the former week, so release on Friday, the Thursday before, Wednesday before, and so on. That is kind of like your post-production week. So ideally Monday, you could send it to your post-producer. So you could send it to like, me and my team, for example. Monday is when we receive it. Typically, it takes like a team about 2 to 3 days. That's what our standard is, at least. So by Wednesday is when we would send it back, the first draft. And that day and Thursday is when you can like review it, send any reviewing notes. You can create a second draft and then it's approved. And then Thursday is when you set it for release. Honestly, that's pretty good for like a weekly schedule. If like the post-production team, whoever you work with, can rely on you recording, possibly for an idea, you recording your show Monday morning, sending it Monday in the like 1 p.m. to the post-production team. And then that just like you run with that schedule. And again, I'm thinking on the fly here as I'm looking at this because it's tricky to think about it because like like I'm just envisioning like any podcast out of whatever. It's really determined on what you need and what's practical for your schedule. That's been the whole, I guess, the bottom line principle of this whole episode is, what's your schedule look like? What's reasonable for you? Cool. Let's work with that. But going back to my example, because I was kind of running with a bi-weekly schedule here, the former week is kind of more of like a cool, you record it on the Monday before. You can't send it off that day, and that gives the team that you work with way more time to work on. You can go through the remainder of the time working on show notes, working on transcription stuff, working on publishing. And if your schedule is like, free for like you're all of a sudden free, you have a lot of time, you can really start banking on those episodes and just start cranking them out one after another for your biweekly schedule. So now you have like a whole month to work on your next set of episodes. I'm hoping this makes sense because it's a lot of like ideating here. And I don't have a schedule in front of me with you where we're just kind of like, cool, let's like work on this together. But that's kind of the gist of it. Yeah, that kind of falls into, there's a little question above the schedule that I have here that says, how many days will you need to record, edit, review, revise, and schedule an episode? That's kind of much more of like a launching off point for the schedule below. Like if you say 7 days, cool. Look at 1 week, start writing that out your little notes like edit on Monday, review on Wednesday, schedule on Thursday, Friday's release day. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it for this. Again, this is all like ideating stuff, very heady things. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. There should be an email available for you to do so on our website, which I'll have a link in the description and show notes associated with this format, however you're listening to a video, audio. Same thing with the PDF. If again you're listening to this for the first time and you're liking the idea of at least looking at it, reviewing it, maybe it'll be helpful for you to just kind of go through and do it on your own, and then you can come back and check out the show, or you can work along. You can start from episode 1 onward. Yeah, the link for that PDF will be in the description and show notes as well. Yeah, feel free to reach out. Let's do a consultation call if you like all this. Trying to think if there's anything else. Rate, review, share, comment, create a conversation, whatever works for you. Yeah, until the next episode. Next one's going to be about content plan. Got some guests you're thinking about for your interview, brain dumping some ideas. It'll be a great time. It should be a quick one too. This is going to be much more just like ideas, boom, write it out. But yeah, until the next episode, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.